Hi, I'm Hernandez, and this is Book Chat with You. In this, or most episodes, I want this to be a conversation back and forth with us about literature. Whenever I can, I post the links for the social media, and when I can, I post the links down below of a story, either audio recording or, the PDF or something like that whenever it's available. So today, though, is a little bit different because I'm going to spend today a bit more of kind of making a warning. We're still looking at a short story here. We're looking at Sherwood Anderson's short story Hands. I get it from here, this book, the story and its writer, edited and selections selected by and charters. The short story Hands by Sherwood Anderson is, it's more of a description, and it's out of many ways. We might not even call this a story. It's about a man about 40 years old named Wing Biddlebaum. He spends most of his time alone. He has one friend, George Willard, and he had been a school teacher at one point in Pennsylvania. He had been a school teacher there when he was about 20 years old. And then he had been a school teacher for a little while. I can't imagine for super long if someone's about 20 years old, which almost kind of throws me off guard, right? So the guy was 20. How long might he have been a teacher? I mean, how much different were things back then in 1919? Which this is a funny thing trying to make content online like this. Because if I get a story, I read it about 5 times or something like that, then I try to make a recording. I cannot do every part of due diligence to try to make these fast enough and create a conversation with you, right? I mean, there's always a bit of immediacy that goes into it, that there are parts that need more research, and I cannot do all of that, So this story taking place in 1919, but when I did, so what had happened though, is that we keep being told that this is a story about hands, and that he has a way with his hands. It's sort of like maybe touching, maybe caressing, and at least in the descriptions here, what we're, to our knowledge, it's not passing boundaries and stuff. Well, I guess it does pass some boundaries, and I might sound like I keep contradicting myself a little bit with this. But when I did look up a little bit of commentary about this, it's a story a bit about community gossip, town gossip, more than anything else, and how destructive all that is. So what happened is that at about 20 years old, when he would stay up late with the schoolboys just chatting, one night a schoolboy has a horrible dream that the teacher touches him and does unspeakable things. I think it uses that phrase, unspeakable things or something. And so the fathers had got mad at then Adolf Meyers. Originally, Wing Biddlebaum had gone by the name Adolf Meyers. So he runs away, and then he runs to live with his aunt for a time. He didn't even work for a full year. He was just so traumatized by everything that had happened. So part of this just shows that he'd been constantly just timid throughout his whole life. And to me, whatever one may reasonably use nowadays, podcasting, journaling, I don't know, going to church and whatever we might do to also learn about ourselves. And I think sometimes this stuff goes into a ridiculous nature. Whatever those things nowadays did not exist back then. So this character, Wing Biddlebaum, he makes friends with a local journalist named George Willard. And so he makes friends with this journalist. But then at one point, his hands are just going to sort of touch and stuff. But I mean, if you think about it, in some cultures, I mean, maybe even men might hold hands or something like that, People might sometimes pat each other on the back or something like this, People not everywhere are so much like maybe Americans, where we're all social distancing, even though COVID has been over for so long, We're just always social distancing and stuff, Even people want to drive such big cars that even sitting inside the same car, people are 10 feet apart. And so, but then at some point he looks at his own hands and he runs away, And I mean, my wife might claim that I have a fixation or I'm always touching my hair. Well, I let my hair grow out because the sun at least gets my hair to dye enough where my hair still looks brown. If not, my hair can look pretty black, really. So kind of makes my hair a little bit lighter. But he just has a way. Like even right now, I don't know when I'll put a video out of this, but then I keep using my right hand more than typical to kind of move or whatever. And this person, Wing Biddlebaum, he gets ran out of town. He gets ran out of town. But there's a bit of a warning about all this, right? So I'm going to read part of this. I'm going to read a few paragraphs here. On this version, it's page 29, but I don't really think that this book is really available, and I'll try to post a link to the PDF and whatever book you can find this in and stuff. So I'm going to read a little bit of this. And George Willard was right. Let's look briefly into the story of the hands. Perhaps our talking of them will arouse the poet who will tell the hidden wonder story of the influence for which the hands were but fluttering pennants of promise. In his youth, Wing Biddlebaum had been a schoolteacher in a town in Pennsylvania. He was not then known as Wing Biddlebaum, but went by the less euphonic name of Adolf Meyers. As Adolf Meyers, he was much loved by the boys of his school. Adolf Meyers was not by nature to be a rare teacher of youth. He was of those rare, little understood men who ruled by a power so gentle that it passes as a lovable weakness. In their feeling for the boys under their charge, such men are not unlike the finer sort of women in their love of men. And that is but crudely stated. It needs the poet there. With the boys of his school, Adolf Meyers had walked in the evening or had sat talking until dusk upon the schoolhouse steps, lost in a kind of dream. Here and there went his hands, caressing the shoulders of the boys, playing about the tousled heads. As he talked, his voice became soft and musical. There was a caress in that also, in a way, the voice and the hands. The stroking of the shoulders and touching of the hair was part of the schoolmaster's effort to carry a dream into the young minds. By the caress that was in his fingers, he expressed himself. He was one of those men in whom the force that creates life is diffused, not centralized. Under the caress of his hands, doubt and disbelief went out of the minds of the boys, and they began also to dream. And then the tragedy. A half-witted boy of the school became enamored with the young master. In his bed at night, he imagined unspeakable things, and in the morning went forth to tell his dreams as facts. Strange, hideous accusations fell from his loose-hung lips. Through the Pennsylvania town went a shiver. Hidden, shadowy doubts that had been in men's minds concerning Adolf Meyers were galvanized into beliefs. The tragedy did not linger. Trembling lads were jerked out of beds and questioned. He put his arms around me, one said. His fingers were always playing in my hair. Well, I should have moved myself a few inches to the left so that way I could put the words on the screen better without covering part of my face when I put this to video later. Oh yes, and I should say thank you. A few days ago, at least according to Podbeam's stats, I have reached over 100 downloads, and that's unincluding a few other metrics or sites or whatever like that, so thank you. And very few of those were myself kind of downloading or whatever, so thank you very much. That is mostly other people. Yeah, but there's a short warning here, right? As always, when I look at a story, I see what it gives me to talk about, to ask, to say, and stuff like that. And there is some stream of consciousness. I would love to hear what you have to think about all this. But frankly, I'm going to use a little bit of the story as a warning. Just if you work with kids, don't touch them. I know that at times, you might think you're making a connection. You might think, oh, a short little hug, a handshake, a high five. Working back home, and you hear that so much. And then you see a story like this. If I look at the news, I can see plenty of stories about, teachers being accused and stuff like that. And you know what? I've worked in education enough. I know plenty of great teachers and all that stuff. But I've also seen a teacher being falsely accused. I saw it. I was there. Nothing happened. A girl just made a claim. So God forbid he touched her and she made a claim. Like any kind of touch, even like a little, like one finger on the top of her head, So that's all I can say with this too. From the commentary read online, that wasn't the main thrust of the story, but that's a little bit of what I can't help but to take it too. Whatever you might say, whatever commentary you have as well, I'd love to hear it. But I can't help but to throw that out there too. I can't help it. because, in working overseas and stuff, I mean, my boss would tell me with little kids, give them a high five or something like that, a little fist bump or something like that. Okay, then. And maybe working back home, I'm not in a rush to hug kids or something like that. Every now and then some kid pulls on your shoulder, or they want to do the little bunny ears behind your head or something like that. But typically just kind of just to keep your hands to yourself or whatever like that. But also here in China, cameras everywhere, everywhere. And at least the last I know back home in Las Vegas, whatever, at least when I was there, no cameras in the classroom. Cameras in the hallway, sure, but not in the classroom. So even back home, if you went to have a meeting with the kid or whatever, and there's school's empty, you do it in the hallway. People are more likely to pass by when school's over. There's cameras and stuff, but it's really not my place to tell you what I do or don't think or whatever like that. And I would love to just have conversations about this story and any other. I don't know where to have conversations with you. This podcast is probably long enough, but this just came to me. If you work with kids and stuff, I don't know, you hand them a paper, you hand them the paper and they grab their end, kind of like that, you don't hand them the paper and they touch your hand and take the paper. I don't know. I'm kind of broken that way. But with that, this podcast is probably long enough. So have a wonderful day. Bye.